The Apocalypse of Peter is one of the earliest and most detailed descriptions of heaven and hell in Christian literature, and it had a significant influence on subsequent apocalyptic texts. This work describes both the rewards of the righteous and the torments of the wicked. Particular attention is paid to the suffering of the wicked, and the punishments in hell are specific and related to the type of sin committed by the person on earth. Paradise is described as a magnificent, peaceful place, full of light and beauty. It is inhabited by the righteous, who enjoy eternal life in the presence of God. The description of paradise includes images of fertile lands, trees with beautiful fruits, and springs of living water. In paradise, peace, joy, and purity reign, where there is no suffering or sorrow. Although the Apocalypse of Peter was not included in the canonical texts of the New Testament, it remained an important source for subsequent generations of Christians, especially in their ideas about judgment and the afterlife. Its influence is visible in iconography, theology, and even in literary works. Hell, on the other hand, is full of terrible suffering and torment, and the Apocalypse of Peter describes these torments in detail, intended for different categories of sinners. Each punishment is associated with a specific sin that the person committed during his life. I will give you a few examples. For example, the punishment for murderers. Those who committed murder are constantly tortured, tormented by worms eating their bodies. Murderers, those who shed innocent blood, stand in a place full of worms, which continually gnaw at their bodies. And here is the punishment for those who did not respect the poor. These sinners are constantly hungry and thirsty, but cannot find food or drink. This is a symbolic punishment for their hard-heartedness towards the needy. And I saw other men and women dying of hunger and thirst, and groaning, suffering because they could not find consolation, for they had not shown mercy to the poor in their lives. Punishment for those who lent money at interest and demanded it back. In another great lake, full of pus and blood and boiling mud, stood men and women up to their knees. These were the ones who lent money at interest and demanded interest on interest. But there are some interesting points. For example, the mercy of God. A hint at the possibility of God's mercy even for sinners. At the end of the text, Peter asks God for mercy for the tormented souls, and God, in some versions, shows compassion by temporarily freeing them from suffering. Here is what the Apostle Peter wrote about this. "And I heard the voice of God saying, 'Listen, my sons, perhaps they will someday be saved and find a place among the righteous.'" Why is this an interesting point? Well, at least in other apocalyptic writings, the fate of sinners is described as final. There will be no forgiveness for them, and that's it. But here, the result is described a little differently. Yes, there is the revelation of John the theologian, which all Christians know. This is a canonical book, the only prophetic book of the New Testament. The Apocalypse of Peter is still not included in the Bible. However, the vision of the afterlife is given not to John, but to the Apostle Peter. This in itself is unique, since Peter is considered one of the most important disciples of Christ and the head of the apostolic community. But his role as a prophet and revelator is rarely indicated in other texts. Unlike some other apocalyptic texts, where the torments of hell are presented as a general punishment for all sinners, in the Apocalypse of Peter, each category of sinner receives a punishment corresponding to their sins. This concept of the Thalian punishment, in which the punishment mirrors the deed, became an important element of many later Christian texts, including medieval descriptions of hell such as Dante's Divine Comedy.